今年你试了吗？可以吗？
他正在那个转到直播会议，马上就还有几秒就应该能进去了。
好，你试了以后，咱们就赶紧可以放人了，可以吗？
现在已经开始直播，正在那个转到直播会议，马上就还有几秒就应该能进去。看我关一下，看我关哪？
现在可以，我们说话仍然是可以听到的，对不对？直播里。
看我关一下，你们会听到回音是吧？
对，你需要关其中的一个。
对，我看我关哪个啊？
可以，我们说话仍然是可以听到的，对不对？直播里。
看我关一下，你们会
有。
现在你们谁能去
Should I move? Should I move to the first slide of the presentation and away from the land acknowledgement? And Helen and I will just say the land.
关了电脑的那个音频。
Yeah, I think now you don't need to share screen for now. And after people come in, and I will introduce them about the webinar and the topic, and you and Helen, and then I will hand over to you, and you can start to share the screen. Okay? Good, great. 好，那个欣姐，我们现在要放人进来了哦。欣姐，你给我 co-host。People come in, and I will introduce them about the webinar and the topic, and you and Helen, and then I will hand over to you, and you can start to share the screen. 欣姐听不到我们讲话，她只能从 YouTube 里听到我们讲。那个欣姐，我们现在要放人进来了哦。
对 I can only hear you guys through the YouTube because I turn it off here on the Zoom. This is the only way. You can hear me, right?
可以。Hi, Helen.
Good morning.
Good morning, Helen.
Good morning, Joanna. You're looking sharp this morning.
Oh, it's that lipstick.
I agree.
The Zoom lipstick.
It's my Zoom lipstick, exactly. You know, lipstick is a very magical substance. It just brings everybody's face alive.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yeah. 您 Yeah. Hi, 您。
So Helen, I don't actually have the presentation on my PC. I'm doing something that's kind of over the internet.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, well, hopefully cool is good. It works. Okay. I'm just going to start by opening up the share screen again and make sure it all works fine.
It is what it is.
Yeah, and so the land acknowledgement is the first slide, but I'm not opening it as the first slide. We will just say that on our own, okay?
I'm just going back in to find it.
So that works. Stop share for now. Okay.
Hi, Wendy. Hello, 永俊。好嘞，
开始了是吗？
对，那个对，林田，麻烦那边直播可以打开了。
OK，艾米是24，我终于搞清楚。
好嘞，谢谢。好的，那个香若，你现在在翻译房间了是吗？
是的，
还没有。
我刚刚显示了我的一个语言，是我显示了中文，我选择了中文。
你要进到翻译房间。如果我还能听到你的声音的话，就说明你还没有进到房间。
OK，但是一般是让我去选择的，我没有
稍等一
没
下啊，
有自己，
稍等一下。
刚刚让我选择了我的语言，我选择了中文。
好，我们的直播马上就开始啊，再稍微等一下，我这边会把我们的那个中文的房间打开。夏若，你稍等，我应该把你放到房间里，但是房间在哪儿呢？完蛋了，这次可能没有。我们的翻译房间去哪儿了？好吧，这次可能要做传译了，不能做直译，那个同。
Do you hear me clearly? Okay, good.
从而实现高绩效的工作场所文化。他拥有30多年的领导团队提高组织效能的经验，以及8年的主题演讲经验。Joanna 擅长激发、激励和与领导者合作，支持他们的业务转型， 他对人际关系动态有着敏锐的理解。他通过教授瑜伽、冥想和压力管理课程，他赋予领导者自觉参与的力量，以发挥他们全面的潜力，并创建以价值观为基础的文化。那 Joanna 获得了 NTL， 也就是国家培训实验室应用科学、应用行为科学研究所的组织发展证书，有 CPF、CTF 和 Top 培训师的认证，同时呢，还是认证的马术引导师和 Barrett Value Center 的文化转型顾问。所以，Joanna， so Joanna, wave your hand to everybody. Oh no, okay, thank you. 所以现在 Helen Helen 呢，拥有30年扎实的引导经验，为广大客户提供优质的团体流程简化服务。那么，他支持了个人、团体和组织实现其预期结果。他是 CTF Top Trainer、ICAA 的 CPF Master 以及变革管理 APMG 的认证。他毕业于利文斯通专业教练中心。Helen 的首要热情是确保他的参与者拥有发言权，提供反馈并提供意见，以实现积极的成果。他相信有意义的参与的核心是让每一次互动在参与者之间建立信任和信誉。那么今天2位大师为大家带来的主题是价值观和文化演进。那么现在欢迎我们的直播嘉宾。So Joanna, I hand over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Yo-Yo. I want to acknowledge that the land on which I am right now is in Ottawa, Canada, and it's the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe peoples. The Algonquin peoples have lived on this land since time immemorial, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to be present in this territory. Helen?
Good afternoon and good evening, folks. My name is Helen Wythe. I'd like to acknowledge that I am on Treaty 6 territory, which is Alberta, Canada, the traditional meeting grounds, gathering place, and traveling route. I acknowledge all the many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit whose footsteps have marked these lands for centuries.
So welcome to the webinar on values and our culture evolution. This webinar is an introduction to our culture transformation course that Helen and I are teaching for ICAA Associates on November the 6th and the 7th online in about 6 weeks' time. A new business paradigm is emerging in the business world. It's a transformation from the age of information, where knowledge capital was very important to everybody, and we're moving into the age of consciousness, where cultural capital is very important to business leaders in how they think, act, and make decisions about the health and performance of their organization. Now, cultural capital, your workplace culture, is actually becoming a capital resource to attract and engage and retain the top talent in the business world. And your culture or cultural capital is made up of your values and behaviors, how you work together. And what's happening out in society is actually impacting what's happening inside organizations, because those values that people are living and experiencing, they're bringing them in. And so if your organization is not evolving and keeping pace with what's happening externally in society, then you may cease to have the relevance and to be able to attract the kind of people that you need for your organization. Now, I wrote the book, Conscious Culture, as a result of working with senior leaders for 39 years in the business world. And I was very fortunate to work with successful leaders who were able to transform their organizations. And it's, I wrote it for business leaders. It's available in all formats, whether you want it Audible, ebook, paperback, hardcover, you name it. And there's 12 chapters in the book, and at the end of each chapter is a worksheet that leaders or managers could use and work with as an exercise with their teams in order to help them understand the changes that are required in their organization, to help them change mindsets and behaviors as well. When I look back at the leaders that I've worked with, what made them really successful was how they focused on their people. And I want to give you one example. Back in 1987, that's a long time ago, it was at the beginning of my career, and it was really probably one of the most successful projects that I ever worked on. And the reason it was such a success was the preparation that they did and how they worked with their people. So imagine a time in your office where there were no computers. All you had was an electric typewriter. And so I was part of a team that sold and implemented the first office automation system into a government department for the Canadian government of 1,500 people. And what we were introducing to them was email, word processing, and time management for the very first time. So you can imagine what a huge cultural transformation that was in terms of changing how people work together. And there were 4 reasons why that project was so successful. The first one was we did a roadshow across Canada. We went to every single government office and we gave a presentation on the 5 years of pilot projects that they had done in terms of testing and working with people. And so they learned a lot, and we shared. The senior leaders came to those presentations. They answered all the questions that people had. And they also addressed a lot of people's emotional fears, because when it comes to big change, people are going to have fears. You know, am I going to be able to learn the new material? You know, how good am I going to be? What kind of impact is it going to have on my relationships and the work that I do? Another thing that made a big difference was the leaders being there, answering questions and caring for their staff. They started to build trust in the leadership. Because if you don't trust your leaders, it's going to have an impact on the performance, especially your engagement as an individual. And then finally, what also made a huge difference is every person received training, and every single office received a new position. It was a support person who was there just to give people help and support, you know, because they're learning brand new tools like they never used email before. So what I learned in this process of working with seniors around the world is that people want to know how much you care before they care what you know. So every successful leader that I've worked with, they were smart, they were technically competent, but what made them stand out and what made them successful was how much they cared for their people. I want to give you another example. I was giving a talk in Singapore to Morrison Foerster. They're like the number 10th largest legal firm in the world. And there's one senior partner that I was working with to prepare for the talk. She was telling me about her first experience working for a New York law firm. And in that law firm, the culture was very command and authoritarian. And she never felt comfortable bringing her values of compassion and empathy into the workplace. She just didn't think it would be accepted. And so she never was really high performing. She just never felt like she really fit in. And then she got the opportunity to work for Morrison Foerster in Singapore. And Morrison Foerster had a very people-centered, people-focused culture. There she was able, you know, to work to bring her values of compassion and empathy into the workplace. And she was so successful that she became a senior partner. And her associate is also now a partner in the organization. So this is Baroness Minouche Shafik. Now, she used to be the president and vice chancellor of the London School of Economics, one of the premier public policy schools in the world. She's now the first female president of Columbia University since 1754, and she's a board member on the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And these are her thoughts when it comes to workplace and working together. Jobs in the past were about muscle. Now they're about brains, but in the future, they'll be about heart. Now, you know, I'm not, whoa, what happened? Can you see the screen?
Yes.
Yeah, Joanna, we can see it.
You can, okay, because I can't. Don't want that. Okay, there we go. Thank you. So I'm not asking you to, stop going to the gym and stop working out, but the question is, how do you lead from the heart? How is that done? We're just having some technical difficulties here. Okay. So the morning of my first webinar, it was 3:30 in the morning. And I woke up with this aha. I don't know if that's ever happened to you, but it was just like so powerful. I can remember jumping around the room. I could actually see a rainbow coming into my bedroom with this big pot of gold. And it was just the most amazing insight. It was something that would be so valuable to leaders. And it had to do with where and how they could inspire their people, inspiring motivation and performance, but from the inside out. Because a lot of organizations, they spend money on external rewards, which cost a lot of financial resource on organizations. But what I discovered that morning was values are a source of life force energy. Computer. But my screen is doing some funny things. Values are a source of life force energy and the language of the heart. When lived, they give us a positive mental attitude and inspire us to live into our full potential. Now, what this means is business leaders have to recognize that the values of their people are the heartbeat of excellence. And for managers and staff, values of the people are something that they want to acknowledge frequently, because the more you are aware of your personal values, the more valuable they become, because your values are a source of your energy, but they also are the language of the heart. Because I ask you, where do you experience values of trust, respect, and loyalty? Do you experience them here in your head or here in your heart? Now, if you think about it, when you're working together, how high performing are you when you feel trust and respected and loyalty? It's amazing how those values give you energy. So I want to tell you my own personal story of change through love. This is my daughter, Stephanie, and she met her husband in London back in 2008. They got engaged, and then they moved to Singapore. Now, the one thing that expats miss when they're abroad is family. And she had 2 children, and she's a millennial. All her life, I told her, you can get whatever you want. You work hard enough, you can achieve your dreams. Well, when she was living in Singapore and she had 2 children, her dream was to get her parents to move to Singapore, because she missed having family. Family was very important to her, and she wanted to have grandparents in her children's lives. Now, at the time, we had just built a beautiful home on the Gatineau River. And now you need to know there's a big difference between my husband and I. When my daughter started asking me to move to Singapore, I was close to my 60s, and the thought of moving to Singapore, the other side of the world from where I live now, I thought it was a great adventure. I was going, yes, I can't wait, to do something as exciting as that. Now, my husband, now I had moved 13 times before I graduated from high school. So change is kind of like my middle name. I love change. But you know how sometimes you marry your opposite? Well, I married a man whose mother lived in the same house for 80 years, which means he never moved, not even once. And, there's like a metaphor for our relationship. I'm riding a Harley Davidson motorcycle, and my husband is in my sidecar, holding on for dear life. He balances me, which is wonderful. But at the same time, I also lead him through a lot of change that sometimes he's uncomfortable with. And when I started asking him, yes, let's go to Singapore, let's move to the other side of the world, he was going, whoa, 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 there's no way I am moving to the other side of the world. And, when you think about it, we had a lot of fears that we had to address. I didn't have a job over there. There was no income coming in. I had no clients. And what about our two sons that were living back in Canada and all of our friends and family? For them, that was, it was a big deal. So how did I get through? How did I have that confidence to be able to move from Ottawa to Asia? Well, for 14 years at that time, I had been doing breathing and meditation practices. And these are the top two methods for developing a calm mind and emotions. Because when you experience stress, it's very difficult to think clearly, to have the energy and the focus and the confidence that you need. And in doing these practices, these breathing practices every day, I believe it gave me the confidence to be able, and the energy to be able to move to the other side of the world. And at the end of our session today, I will gladly teach you one of those breathing techniques that are on the course. It's called the bellows breath. But what really made a difference in giving me the energy to be able to move to the other side of the world was my personal values. Two values of family, two values of family and wanting to be with my grandchildren. These are my two little grandchildren here who I just wanted to be a grandmother with. It's very hard to be a grandmother when all they see is you on like Zoom or Skype, right, at the time. And the second value that made a huge difference for me was wanting to make a difference. And the work that I had been doing with values and that aha moment of wanting to share with leaders around the world the power of personal values and the energy that it gives you. I wanted to make a difference. So we moved to Singapore in 2014. Now, there's a lot, since the pandemic, there has been a lot of focus and a lot of books written on corporate culture. And, information knowledge used to be the cultural capital. But now what's emerging is something called cultural capital. And this is the new competitive advantage in business today. Just as you need financial capital and you invest in your human capital, your workplace culture now is a capital resource. It needs investment, it needs focus, especially as people today, when they're looking for new jobs, new employment, they're looking at the workplace culture. What's it going to be like working there? How am I going to be treated? What kind of career path do we have? These are all really important things, and it has to do with how people work together. So what is culture? Well, culture is all about how you work together. and it is your values and behaviors. So if you think about your own culture in your organization, how are you investing in your corporate culture? And who is responsible for the culture? Well, it's the leaders. Why is it the leaders? Because everybody follows the leader. There was a client that I worked for. His name was Daniel Leclerc. And he was given the responsibility of changing the work. And at the time, they were responsible for $24 billion in spending by the government. And their client satisfaction rating was 50%. Not very. The senior leaders recognized that it needed to be changed. And they gave Daniel that responsibility to transform the workplace culture across the whole government department. And so Daniel put together a senior leadership team of all the director generals from all, the 7 different branches. And he created a client service excellence committee. And every week they met. And after the first year, he contacted me. He said, Joanna, I have a real problem on my team of engagement. The senior leaders are not coming to meetings. They are sending their directors. Well, there's this thing in business called monkey see, monkey do. So what were the directors doing? Same thing as their leaders were doing. They weren't showing up at the meeting. They were sending their managers. So Daniel recognized he had a very big problem, because if the senior leaders were not coming to the meetings, it essentially meant that his project, his culture change project, was not going to be successful, because he needed those senior leaders at the meetings to be able to be making the decisions and then going back to their branches and then implementing those decisions. So what he did was he asked me to do a values assessment of his team. And what showed up is there were 3 values, personal values, that were very important to them, that were not showing up in the current culture, but they were showing up in the desired workplace culture that they wanted. And those values were excellence, leadership, and ethics. Also, what showed up on the assessment was vision. It was a desired value. They weren't really sure what they were working towards. And some of the problems also that we talked about in that assessment debrief was one of the reasons, or a couple of the reasons they weren't showing up in the meetings, was Daniel was creating the agendas every week. So they had no involvement in creating the agenda. And then second, the assistant deputy minister was always telling the committee what to do. So they really didn't feel that their leadership was required. And when we looked at their mission and vision and we created it for them, we recognized just how important leadership was for this whole team. And so we transformed that committee into a client service excellence leadership team. Bingo, transformed their engagement 100%. Over the next 4 years, they transformed their client service excellence from 50% to 95%. And everything that they did is a case study in my book. One of the things you need to recognize when it comes to culture in any organization, it is actually shaped by the worst behavior that the leader is willing to tolerate, with not addressing bad behavior. If you disrespect people, or if you shout at people as a leader, that's basically telling everybody else, you know what, it's okay to behave that way. And the reality is, culture how you work together, it's not something soft and fluffy. It is actually really important to understand that how you behave and how you treat people creates the workplace that everybody works in. You know, sometimes people say, well, you know, we've always done it this way. Why do we need to change? And the reality is, if you don't change, sometimes this could actually be considered malpractice in some industries if you don't change and keep pace with what's happening in society. Okay. So why do 9 out of 10 strategic initiatives fail? Well, leaders, they work at the top of the organization. Their role is to create the plans and the vision and the strategies. And the organization, they're responsible for implementing those plans and those strategies and achieving the goals. And it's the leaders, sorry, it's the managers and the staff. They work together, and then how they work together depends a lot on the style of the leader, how people communicate, how they make decisions. And this is actually the workplace culture. The reason why 9 out of 10 strategic initiatives fail. A colleague of mine in Singapore did a 2-year study, reached out to 200 businesses. And what they found was that 9 out of 10 strategic initiatives failed because the leaders failed to change the behaviors of people to achieve those strategies. Changing behavior is culture transformation, culture evolution, because that's what workplace is. That's what workplace culture is. It's how people work together. So if your culture is not in alignment with your strategies, it's going to be very difficult to be successful in achieving those strategies. You need cultural alignment. The way people work together need to be the way that they need to work to achieve those strategies. This is where the saying comes from: culture eats strategy for breakfast. Now, there's a saying by Albert Einstein: doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results is insanity. Well, my definition of cultural insanity is maintaining the same leadership style, same communication style and decision-making, and expecting different results. So when you think about it, right, something has to change. If you want people to be more engaged and higher performing, what are you changing in your workplace culture and how you work together to enable that change to happen? So a little bit of audience participation here. And I want to hear from people. What are some qualities of a great leader? So think back, or maybe even in the organization you're working today, people that you're working with. What are some qualities of a great leader? So Yo-Yo, if you could reach out to the network and let me know what are some of those positive qualities that people experience.
We have something in the chat: positive attitude,
Okay, positive attitude. What else?
courage,
Okay, courage. What else?
collaborative,
Collaborative. Okay, what else?
accessible,
Accessible. Okay,
empathy,
what was that?
empathy,
Empathy.
Empathy.
Okay,
Yeah.
empathy. Got it. What else?
care for people.
Caring for people.
Yeah.
Okay. Now I want you to think about a toxic leader. Somebody that you've worked for that was not very pleasant. In fact, had a very toxic Are we getting any from people?
Not yet.
Okay.
Controlling. Argumentative. Will not listen. Gaslights others.
Sorry, my slides are moving. Okay, here we go. Toxic.
Selfish. Cares about own success and not about others.
Yeah. Now, imagine it's Sunday night and you're preparing for work the next day. Who would you rather go and work for? Which kind of boss? Who do you think is going to enable you to engage your highest? And which kind of leader would you not want to work for? I think it's pretty clear, isn't it? It's a great leader. Now, the qualities that you shared with me, positive attitude, courage, collaborative, accessible, empathy, caring for people. If you notice, these are all personal qualities. These are not characteristics that you learn at the top, at the Ivy League universities. These are all personal qualities that everybody can live into. So everybody can be a conscious self-leader. You may not have a leadership position in your organization, but when it comes to your own self-leadership, these qualities are very important for impacting and influencing the people around you. Because you may not be a leader at work, but in your home, if you're a parent, you are a leader. And so your personal values and how you live into them make a huge difference. I want to share a story of another organization that I worked with called PJAC Canada. I apologize for my slides turning slowly. I don't want to press my return key too many times because then it goes forward too much. There we go. So PJAC Canada, PJAC stands for the Council of Canada. And this was an association it's a $9 billion industry, the pet industry. Now that's a lot of dog chow. And the CEO of the organization had been the CEO for about 20 years. And he was not very happy with the engagement of his board members. Whenever he came to meetings, he was so well prepared. All he basically did was to ask them to sign on the dotted line. And one day he was at a conference and in a conference center, and he walked past one of the conference rooms and he looked inside and he saw a group of about 20 people, and all around the room were these flip charts. And he was going, wow, those people look really engaged. That's the kind of strategic planning I want to do with my board. But I don't know how to get them engaged. And so at the end of the day, he went back to that conference room and he spoke to the facilitator. And he asked the woman, what are you doing? What kind of process are you using? And she said, well, I'm doing a strategic planning process using the technology of participation. And so he came back to Ottawa, looked online, and he found myself, a facilitator, and used the technology of participation to do strategic planning. And so he invited me to do a strategic planning session for his board, because they were just going into that process. So we did a one-day session together. We identified all of their challenges. They created 4 different key focus areas. We created an action plan for each of those focus areas. But the most important thing that had the biggest transformation for them was they identified 4 values: responsibility, open communication, leadership, and excellence. And along with those values, they identified key behaviors that they wanted everybody to live into. And you know what? That was the most successful thing, because immediately the board transformed their behavior. And the leader himself, who had been a leader for many years, he became much more effective because he was consciously living in the behaviors that they were asking for. Now, after the success of the planning session, I had mentioned to him, I said, you actually have some limiting beliefs about how you operate. Because what I heard a lot during the planning session was from the animal activists saying, you know what, you shouldn't be making money off the backs of animals. And the reality is, as the pet industry, you need to have an industry. You need to have pet stores, because where else are you going to go to buy the pet food? But the problem was there was a disconnect between their culture, their internal culture, and their external brand. When you went onto their website, all you saw was business, 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 business. And so I asked the CEO, I said, why have you been the CEO of this organization for 20 years? And he said, because I love animals. And this was very true. I went into their offices, and oh my God, I saw snakes, I saw spiders, I saw dogs. I mean, they loved their pets. They were all there. I said, well, there's a disconnect. Your brand is your love of animals. And so what they did was, one of their strategies going forward was to transform their website. And now if you go to the PJAC website, you see how much they love animals. And they came up with a brand new tagline: animal welfare is everyone's business, which was very true. And also in the process of doing the external outreach to all of their stakeholders, they heard about all the good things that they were doing. And this transformed their mindset. With a new mindset, they were able to live into values and behaviors even more effectively, which again, transformed the organization. And they're still around today. They aren't losing their association members, which was a situation that had presented itself back when we started the project. And one of the reasons why they knew they needed to transform their culture, because if they didn't, they were going to continue to lose association members and lose the revenue that they needed to function as an organization. So a little audience participation again. I want to do an exercise that can be very impactful. If you are working in a group with somebody else there beside you, I want you to think about one value that's very important to you. For example, one of my values that made a difference in my life was family. And now, what's your belief about this value? Well, family for me is very important. I do whatever I can for my children to help them live into their own potential. And one of the things I did was to move to the other side of the world. That's how much family means to me. And so recall, what do you actually do to live in that behavior? And then, what would happen? How might you feel if this value was not lived or it was ignored? Well, for me, I kept on working. I went over to Singapore. I built relationships. I wrote a book, all of it to support my move to Singapore. So I'd like to hear from some people who are attending the webinar. What's one of your personal values? What's your belief about the value, and how do you live into it? There's somebody who is willing to share. Are people having conversations, Yo-Yo, about?
You are expecting in small group conversation or just in large group?
Well, I kind of want to know what people are doing. Are they having a conversation? Are they sharing a personal value with each other?
No, they're typing something in the chat. They're still in large group.
They're doing it in a large group?
So you want to create a small group right now, right? I just
Yeah.
want to double confirm.
Yeah.
OK，你那边那个小房间是不是已经准备好了？
Yeah, it's ready in 6 small groups. Yeah. Okay,
Oh.
I can do it now.
So in your small groups, share with each other one of your top values. Talk about what's your belief about this value, how you live it, and how you might feel it if it was ignored. So take the next couple of minutes in small groups to share with each other one value, your belief about that value, the behaviors and how you live into it, and how you might feel. Okay, take the next couple of minutes to share with each other in small groups.
Okay. How many minutes?
A couple of minutes, 2 minutes.
Okay.
Are people in small groups now?
Yes. But I'm afraid 2 minutes may be too short, and
Okay,
for
give
them
them-
to
Give them
share.
5 minutes. Give them 5 minutes then, that's fine.
Okay, all right.
5 minutes would be better. We have the
Yeah.
time. We have the time.
张老师，我看到你在这里，你可以进房间，是中文的房间，没有问题的哈。
Is everybody in small groups now?
Yep.
Not
Not? How many? Sorry, how many?
you still have some people.
Oops.
I don't think they click the drawing. We have Amy, Trina, Li Kun,
Okay, let's have a-
Christine. Yeah.
while they are in their small groups, can we have a little discussion here? Can I ask you, Yo-Yo, what's one of your top values?
My top value is passion.
Passion. Okay. What's your belief about the value of passion? Why is that important to you?
Because I think if people do a job without passion, that's just a waste of the time.
It's a waste of time.
Yeah. It's
Okay.
just spend the time, waste of time. Yeah.
Okay, so how do you live into that value of passion? How would I know by watching you work that passion is a value, is a personal value? What do you do? How do you live into it?
I'm not quite clear about the question. This how?
How do you live passionately? Tell me how you live passionately. How would I know that passion is a personal value of yours?
For example, I want to spend time with the on the thing I think it deserves my time and I like to do. I think it's valuable. The same thing with the people. I want to spend my time with the people. I think it's valuable for me and valuable for some relationship. I don't, yeah, that maybe that's kind of behavior you're looking for.
Yeah, well, yeah. And how would you feel if you couldn't live with passion? How would it make you feel if you couldn't live with passion?
I won't have any motivation if just being asked to do something without passion. And yeah, and I just lose my creative and just, do the job, and do the job with a passion means differently for me.
Yeah, it's true,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
Thank you.
thank
How
you.
about yourself, Yang? What's one of your personal values? I can't hear you. You're muted. Can't hear
No,
you.
Yang is in the translation room. She is
Oh,
in
she's
the
busy. She's busy.
yeah,
Okay.
in the Chinese channel. That's why you cannot
Oh, that's
hear
fine.
her.
Wrong person to ask then. How about Ning? What's one
Oh,
of your
ecology. Yeah, being
okay, so
equal treated.
what's your belief about ecology or eco changes?
Yeah, because we think, yeah, we are equal. Yeah. Maybe we coming from different country and we have different age and or years of experience, and come to the end, we're all human being, and we have the same, spiritually, and yeah, we are equal.
Okay, so equal, not okay. So equality.
Yeah.
Would that be the
Yeah.
value? Okay.
Yes.
How do you live the value of equality? What are some of the
Which
things that you do?
Yeah, which means I show people my respect, and no matter in his rank and his money, his authority level, yeah, I treat people with my respect.
Yeah. And how does it make you feel when you're able to live that value of equality?
Depressed, yeah. Or sometimes maybe got angered, and I'll try to fight for it.
Okay, so if it's not lived, you get angry. But how do you feel when you are able to live the value of equality?
Sad and anger. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
How are we doing for time, Yo-Yo? Should we
I
call
think
people back?
Yeah, I think we can
Yeah.
call people back. Yes.
Okay. All right. So we got 60 seconds and they will come back.
Okay, great. So when people come back, I'm going to ask for some examples from the people who have come back. Can we? And perhaps you can read out what you see on the screen in the chat in answer to these questions. Can you let me know? Okay, it takes a minute. So.
Yeah. Are they come back?
People are coming back? Okay. Oh,
Yeah.
I'd like to hear what are some examples of people's personal values, their beliefs and behaviors. So if one person, or if you could read out what one person shares in terms of a personal value, their belief about that value and behaviors.
那个中文组的小伙伴可以说中文啊，您会帮你们翻译成英文，所以不要紧，可以大胆分享。
Is anybody sharing?
I don't think so.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna use your example, Yo-Yo, then. All right. So can
Yeah.
you share with us what you shared with me? What is your example of personal value for you?
Passion.
Okay, passion. So what's your belief about passion? Why is that important to you?
Yeah, because I think if you do things without passion, it's just a waste of the time.
Just a waste of time. Okay, without passion. And so how do you live that value? How do you actually live it? What are the things that you do?
Yeah, I really plan spend my time with the people and on the things I have passion, and I think that's valuable for me or for the relationship or for society. That's how I plan my time.
Okay. So I want you to think about the person that you had that relation, that I had the conversation with. Before speaking with them, what was the level of trust that you had for that person? And now, after you've had a conversation and you've shared your values with each other, what is the level of trust that you have in that person? The interesting thing about values is that when you share them with each other and you and people talk, what's happening is you're creating internal cohesion at the heart level, because values are the language of the heart. Where you experience them is here in your heart center. And so when you share your values, people speak their truth. And so this is a wonderful exercise to do with teams, where people sit down, pick 3 of your top personal values and go through that exercise. What's your belief about each value? How do you live into it? How would you feel if it was stepped on or ignored? And then as a team, first start with pairs, one-on-one, and then share as a team. And then talk about, if you have a mission and vision, if you've got goals that you want to achieve as a team, pick your top 3 values as a team that's going to help achieve that mission and vision. And also identify the behaviors that you want everybody to live into. And it's a very powerful process for getting to know each other from the heart and building trust and internal cohesion on a team. So think about it. How does living your personal values at work inspire greater engagement and performance? When you are able to bring your personal values into the workplace, how does it impact your performance? I'll give you an example. I did it when I was doing a workshop in Singapore. We did this same exercise, and I asked one of the audience members, I said, is there any value that you are not able to bring into the workplace? And she said, she worked at a bank, and she said, enthusiasm. I can't bring my value of enthusiasm into the workplace because it just wouldn't be accepted. She worked in a bank, and so you can kind of understand how being enthusiastic might not be appreciated. And I asked her, I said, okay, how much of your performance is impacted by not being able to bring the value of enthusiasm into the workplace? And she said, 20%. So she was only giving 80% of her potential, because not being able to be enthusiastic kind of, brought down her performance and her engagement. Now imagine if she was earning $100,000, that means $20,000, 20%, was being flushed down the toilet. So imagine everybody in the workplace, if they are not able to bring all of their personal values into the workplace, imagine how much human potential is being flushed down the toilet. This is the power of personal values. As a manager, you want to know what they are, and you want to acknowledge them and you want to enable people to live their personal values. If you are a staff member, if you are an employee, you want to know what your personal values are as well. Because quite often, if you don't feel engaged and you aren't high performing, it might be because one of your personal values is not being recognized and you can't bring it in. And if you want to do something about it, then share with your manager what's important to you. Because if they can, I'm sure your manager will want to enable you to live those values and bring them into the workplace, because it's going to make you higher performing, healthier, happier, more engaged. Now, would you want to continue working in your organization if your personal values were stepped on or ignored? So if you weren't trusted, if you weren't able to live passionately, bring that value into the organization, if you didn't feel respected, or if you know that value of family, whatever your personal values are, if they're being stepped on and ignored, would you want to continue working there? That's the power of personal values. They have a huge impact on people's level of engagement. Now, when it comes to a source of excellence, living your personal values increases your engagement. When you increase your performance, and when your performance goes up, it increases your potential. Now, this is the law of performance. Ability times mental attitude is equal to performance. So if your mental attitude is 0 because you cannot live your personal values, you can't bring those that are really important to you into the workplace, then it doesn't matter how many PhDs or master's degrees that you have. Anything times 0 is 0. So that's the power of personal values. They have a huge impact on your mental attitude, enabling you to be inspired and motivated. And if you cannot live them, then they have an impact on your performance. Now, this is the influence of values on the organization. So values are the core, okay? They are like the human operating system. When you bring your values into the workplace, it creates the culture. It drives the culture. The culture, how people work together, that creates employee engagement. Employee engagement creates client engagement. So imagine, somebody calls the organization and this is what they hear. Yeah, what do you want? Versus, good morning, how can I help you? Two very different experiences. One, how are you? Clearly not an engaged person. Good morning, how are you? They are engaged, they care. Clients can tell what kind of corporate culture you have just by engaging with your staff. Client engagement creates client satisfaction, and client satisfaction creates stakeholder value. Stakeholder value is you living your mission and purpose of the organization. This is why you exist, to be able to provide value to all of your stakeholders, whether they're your clients, your investors, or your community. Now, culture and brand, two very important aspects. Culture is your values, beliefs, and behaviors, but it is something that is experienced on the inside of an organization because it's about how you work together. Your brand is the customer's perspective of you. It's what they experience from the outside in. Who you are on the inside looks a lot like who you are on the outside. And that's the importance of workplace culture. So my question to you is, are you consciously creating your culture, or Do you have an unconscious default culture? Because if you're not consciously creating it, then it's the opposite. It's an unconscious default culture. And I don't think any leader out there wants to stand up with pride and say, I have an unconscious default culture. No, not at all. But the reality is, in today's world, many leaders don't have the experience of transforming culture, of evolving their corporate culture. Managers and leaders, they depend on data, and they haven't had the experience of transforming culture. It's just not something. This is a fairly new development, business paradigm. Now, what you measure, you can manage. You know, all your outcomes, all your outputs rely on how people work together, which is your culture. So, how are you measuring your corporate culture? And this is what I've been doing since 2011. I was introduced to the Barrett Values Center and their cultural transformation tools. So they have a cultural values assessment. This is the same assessment I did with Daniel Leclerc and the Client Service Excellence Committee. So it's a tool that can be used for teams, for leadership teams. It can be used for organizations of 50. It can also be used for organizations of 30,000 or 150,000. PricewaterhouseCoopers, they did a values assessment of their organization. 150,000 people from around the world, all of their consultants, all of their clients participated in the assessment. And they discovered what their top 5 values needed to be going forward. So the assessment is very simple. You can do it online. It asks only 3 questions. The first question is, what are your top 10 personal values? Second question, what are the 10 values that you are experiencing in your current culture? And the third question is, what are your top 10 values that you would like to experience? What's the desired culture that you would like to be experiencing? And the power in these 3 questions is the personal values. You will see what inspires and motivates people. The second question around the current culture, you find out all the positive values that people are experiencing, as well as all the negative or limiting values that people are experiencing. And the third question, the desired values, these are kind of like the antidote. If you do have problems today, people will be asking for things that are going to fix the problems. But as well, the desired culture values, this is the evolution. This is the direction of growth and development that the people in your organization are looking for. And those are the values that we work with. Now, the power in these assessments, it's not the actual data that you get, but rather the conversations that you have about the data that people selected. So the personal values, people can find out what really connects and inspires them. The current culture, if there are limiting values that show up, then you get to talk about what's going on. What impact are old values and behaviors having? Quite often bureaucracy shows up, or hierarchy, or empire building. You know, every organization has a bureaucracy to some degree, and sometimes the bureaucracy is because of old systems that were put in place 10 years ago and just haven't been changed. So talking about what's going on, this is how change happens. Because I can give you a magic pill to make you transform and become a better organization. Transformation happens one conversation at a time. And these assessments give you the data to have those valuable conversations about what's really going on. What are our people telling us? What's the direction that we need to grow and develop in? So having a clear path forward is what's really helpful for organizations. Ardentech is an organization that I worked with in Singapore. They were a manufacturing company. they had 150 people working for them. And every year they would lose 45 people. That's like 30% of their workforce they would lose every year. Now, what really puts a smile on my clients is the cost savings and the profit that they make when they have happy, harmonious people working for them. And how do you create a happy, harmonious workplace environment? You figure out what people need and what they're looking for. So what I did with Ardentech is they participated in my cultural transformation training, and they implemented one of the recommendations, which was to create a culture committee. And that culture committee was made up of people from different parts of the company, from different levels of management and staff. And they would meet monthly and talk about the culture, talk about some of the changes that they were looking for. Over a 2-year period, they were able to reduce people leaving by 30%, which gave them a cost savings of over $1 million. Another testimonial that I would like to share with you is the Royal Canadian Air Force. This was an organization that they're suffering from not having enough members join the force.
The Royal Canadian Air Force, 17 Wing specifically, recently contracted Joanna Barclay and Helen Wythe from ICAA Associates to provide command teams on the wing with their cultural transformation course. Joanna and Helen were extremely knowledgeable and easily passed on the information and their experience. They collaborated closely with the wing to tailor the information to meet our needs and unique community. The cultural transformational training provided was a great supplement to what we already have in place for moving the military in a more innovative and diverse direction. The focus on facilitative, values-based leadership supports and validates initiatives already in use by the RCAF. By liaising with external organizations such as ICAA Associates, we create links and relationships within the community. It further affords us the ability to showcase our commitment to evolving culture within the RCAF and Canadian Armed Forces writ large. We are always willing to learn and incorporate best practices from industry to help make us an employer of choice.
Thank you, Justin. So the Royal Canadian Air Force, their wake-up call was not being able to attract and retain members on the force. They're 15,000 members short. Their workplace culture is something that's negatively impacting them. So 26 leaders attended the culture transformation course, and they have been implementing the tools that we teach and deliver on the course. One thing that's made a huge change for them is that they have also invested in taking the group facilitation methods course, because they recognize that they need to develop facilitative leaders. They recognize the power in having conversations to transform people's mindset and behaviors. And they are going through a cultural evolution, because cultural evolution happens when behaviors in the external environment impact, what's happening in society, those values and expectations of how people are going to be treated and how they treat each other. Those expectations, you need to experience it inside the organization that you are working in. And so they are transforming their workplace culture because of the pressure that they're experiencing in Canadian society. There needs to be cultural alignment for them to be strategically successful. And so they are going through an internal transformation, investing a lot in creating their cultural capital that's going to help them transform the Air Force culture into one where people feel empowered, there's diversity, equity, and inclusiveness.
The Royal Canadian Air Force.
Next. I need to go back one.
Thank you, Joanna. It's my pleasure to share with you some of the highlights of this 2-day course. In session 1, our aim is to help participants experience the life force, energy, and values.
Do you see the agenda for the whole 2 days there, Helen?
Yes,
That's the slide that you see now.
yes, that's a slide I see now.
Do you want to
So
speak?
this then gives you an overview of what the 2-day course looks like on November 6 and 7. You'll see that we're broken up into 2 sessions, each morning and afternoon, and it begins to test out the different topic areas. Session 1, ABCs of high performance, which is a key part of cultural transformation, and it's quite often one of the key takeaways for people in that first session. Second session is bridging the cultural divide. Next session is on core challenges, and Joanna has talked about some of those core challenges. In session 4, we talk about cultural capital, and for many organizations, this is a new concept, but we take it in and put it into business terms. Session 5 is where we share with you a variety of cultural transformation tools. So now we're sharing with you the session aims. The key takeaway for session 1 is the personal values assessment, which Joanna has begun to share with you. The second session, our aim is on expanding your awareness on the influence of values for engagement and performance. And a key conversation here is on that cultural divide. Session 3, the aim here is, and the objective is to look at the core business challenges creating stressful work environments. And in that session, the key tool is the drivers for change. In session 4, we look at cultural capital, which is the new competitive advantage to attract, engage, and retain talent. And one of the key topics here is that culture and brand conversation. Next slide, please.
I'm trying.
Okay.
Come on, slide.
Thank you. Session 5, we look at making the intangible tangible with cultural transformation tools. And this is where we share with you a whole variety of different tools that we know are accessible and available and usable for organizations. And this again is where you begin to tailor some of those transformation tools. And of course, one of the key elements of that is facilitation skills. In session 6, we look at the power of self-awareness and self-mastery for conscious leadership to co-create. This is where we begin to look at really heavily at that facilitative leadership approach, the conscious leadership approach, and how coming to work as a leader, as a human, becomes so important for helping those people that you work with make that shift as well. In session 7, we look at those 5 key steps that Joanna has experienced and explained, and what we still see playing out in terms of preparing an organization for that culture change. We know that if we don't prepare for it and really plan out that shift and that transformation, we're not going to be successful. And in session 8, we share with you the 4-way alignment for implementing successful cultural transformation. There are 4 key elements that leaders must keep in mind balancing and paying attention to and aligning in order for cultural transformation to be successful. And in session 8, this is where we share those elements of character, structure, personality, and culture with you. Pass it over back to you, Joanna.
Thank you, Helen. So what are the things that you need to think about, and some of the key lessons learned, and hopefully I've shared in this webinar, is you want to show your people how much you care. Don't leave your care car in the parking lot. Bring all of your values of compassion, authenticity, relationship building, and empathy into the workplace. Be courageous. It's difficult to sit down and listen to people's comments, especially if they're negative. But the reality is, when you sit and listen to your people, they are going to feel cared for, right? And your people as well are the ones who are doing the work. So in listening to them, they're going to be able to share with you valuable business intelligence to what's going on in your organization and how you can make improvements. So don't see their comments as negative or limiting. Reframe it and see them instead as business intelligence that's going to make you more profitable and more high performing in creating a workplace culture that's more healthy and harmonious for your people. Listen to people's needs. Staff have valuable insights, and it's going to increase the level of engagement and trust if you listen to their needs and then implement what you can, what makes sense, and what's possible. Invest in building relationships, because as human beings, we are herd animals. We are happiest and healthiest when we are connected with other people. We all want to feel loved, and we all want to feel appreciated. Recognize that you don't have to have all the answers. You just need the courage to ask the difficult questions and actively listen to people's answers. Facilitate a culture of participation for the wisest results. It takes, you need to make the time as a leader to invest in facilitation training, to learn the skills, very similar to what the Royal Canadian Air Force are doing right now, developing facilitative leadership. Find out what's working and what's not working and what's desired. Make the time for assessing your workplace culture. And then finally, lead through values to inspire passion and motivation. Remember that values are the language of the heart. They give us that positive mental attitude that enables us to live into our full potential. So, leading consciously. There's a poem that speaks to me when it comes to developing conscious self-leadership. God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. You must have courage to stand up and act, and you need to have courage to sit down and listen. How people work together is equally as important as achieving results. And finally, my belief is that businesses and organizations need to view people not as resources, but as sources, just like the sun. We are virtually inexhaustible and continuously generating energy, light, and resilience. And there's no more powerful source of energy in the world than an inspired, passionate, turned on human being. If you would like more information, I have written an ebook that's available on my website. It's called The 9 Steps of Building a High-Performing Workplace Culture. There we go. If you would like to register for the Culture Transformation course and learn tools to be able to transform your workplace culture and enable it to evolve to meet the needs of your organization and your stakeholders, feel free to register on the ICAA website by clicking on List of All Courses. You can go to my website, www.cultureleadershipgroup.com, to receive for free the ebook 9 Steps to Building a High-Performing Workplace, or you can in the book, which you can purchase on Amazon, Conscious Culture, and have all those resources that are available in the book to work with your students, not with the students, your staff. So, time for Q&A. I'm here. If there's any questions you might have, please feel free, put them in the chat, and Yo-Yo will share them with me.
好嘞，我们现在还有时间给2个问题啊，大家如果有问题的话，请把问题放在对话框里，或者直接开麦讲出来都可以。Any questions here?有没有问题呀？那刚才其实Joanna也分享了很有趣的点啊，关于因为我们一想到文化价值观都是很虚的东西，但是现在我们看到它其实它是一个可衡量的，尤其对企业来说是一个直接可以沟通的语言。So, Joanna.
Yes.
Yeah. In the chat we have a question. How do you address competing or conflicting values you may find in a team or group?
Okay. Well, what I have experienced is that human values are things that people want to achieve. And if you have competing values, then check up. Find out what's important to that person and why. And in discussing the competing values, see where there is a potential for the values actually come together, so that what's really of essence at the core of what people are looking for, find out, okay, what element in that value also connects to another personal value that I might have? Because in essence, that's how you resolve conflict, is to find something that's mutually beneficial to each person and then connect with it. But the reality is, most people want similar values. They just might see them in different ways. Everybody wants respect. Everybody wants loyalty. Everybody wants trust. But how they would like to receive those things might be different behaviors. And that's where you need to discuss to find out, okay, what's the best way of operating in order for everybody to achieve what they need to be successful.
Thank you, Joanna.
You're welcome.
好的 OK, Susan.
我可以用中文提问吗？
可以。
就是我听了之后觉得非常的兴奋，我也想到了，就是我想问的是，是否文化的转型可以在学校里面适用，尤其是当一个学校它的体制，它的制度是非常倾向于，就是只是比如说是为了成绩我在猜想，就是这个文化的转型是否有可能对中国的很多的公立的学校是否也能够 有比较大的帮助和改变。我不知道我问清楚。
Okay, 好。So, Joanna, Susan's question is about if we can apply this cultural evolution to the Chinese education system in school. You know, in Asia, in the school, the education is for the score, for get to the high marks. So, if it still can work with this kind of situation.
Well, when you think about values, and if they're the human operating system, in other words, this is why we behave the way we do. What are your values in the educational system? How do they impact people and their performance? For example, in Finland, after the Second World War, they recognized that they wanted to invest in their country, but they did not have a lot of resources. So they were going to invest in their school system. And one of the values, or a couple of the values that they implemented was equality and responsibility. From an equality point of view, they wanted to make sure that everybody received the same quality of education, that there was no competition. And responsibility was a value that the teachers lived into. Teachers, you know, at the end of a year did not go like this to their students. Even though the student went from one teacher to another teacher, if that child had problems, the teacher stayed connected and maintained responsibility for that student and their performance. There was also the value of teamwork in the classroom, so that when students were answering their homework, they did it from a team perspective, because and children, the students did their homework because they realized if they didn't, they would be letting their team down the next day. In the class, and they were answering their homework, they did it in a team environment. And if you hadn't done your homework, you're going to let your team down. So values can make a huge impact on how you develop any system or any organization. What's important to you, and then how do you enable people to live the behaviors associated with a particular value? Okay, so that's what you need to think about here. What are the values that are going to help you develop the kind of organization and the kind of outcomes that you're looking for? I'm complete.
Thank you. 好，非常感谢Joanna 和 Helen 今天晚上的分享。为了尊重大家的时间，我们的问题就到这里先结束。但是大家有问题的话，可以继续在微信群里面提问。那么最后非常的感谢 Joanna 和 Helen 的分享和大家积极的参与。请大家扫描我们的微信公众号和我们的 YouTube 的 channel 来进行持续的关注。在后面我们会有一个专题，在公众号里面持续发表一系列的文章，关于文化转型，那我们可以一起进行探索。那么今天的直播呢，我们就到这里结束了。所以祝大家晚安、早安，有个愉快的一天和愉快的夜晚。然后我们10月份的直播再见。Thank you, Joanna and Helen.
Do people want me to stay behind and teach the bellows breath? Because I did offer that during the webinar, but it.
好，有没有伙伴想留下来跟 Joanna 练习一下呼吸的啊？可以留一下。